Hello, everyone. My name is John Hagan. I'm one of the co-hosts of Shift by Alberta Innovates. I'm glad you could all join us for today's webinar with Amber Mack. A few things before we begin. We encourage respectful dialogue, and you can participate with other attendees using the group chat feature below the speaker screen. We also encourage questions, so please submit yours through the Q&A function at the taskbar below the speaker screen as well. A little bit about Amber. Amber Mack is considered by many to be the go-to expert on anything to do with technology. She helps companies and audiences stay ahead of the curve. She's an industry veteran, renowned as a journalist, moderator, entrepreneur, consultant, and author. As a speaker, Amber's keynoted at more than 400 events around the world and has moderated sessions with everyone from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, former FBI Director James Comey, to famed astronaut Chris Hadfield. She's also currently the co-host of two popular podcast series, Marketing Disrupted and the award-winning AI Effect. She's the author of the national best-selling business book, Power Friending, and the co-author of Amazon bestseller, Outsmarting Your Kids Online. Amber regularly appears as a business host and expert for Fast Company, Newsweek, CNN, Bloomberg, CTV, and many others. We're very excited to have her with us today. Please welcome Amber Mack.
Thank you so much for having me today. I guess because you called me a veteran, I have officially been in the industry for a long time. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation. I wanted to mention to people that I have the group chat up. We want to make this as interactive as possible, so please drop in all of your questions. I also wanted to mention that we have broken this into 4 parts. So at the end of each part, we're going to stop for a short Q&A. So you have a chance to ask your question about that particular section. So again, please use the chat functionality. The group chat is this kind of second stream, and that gives you an opportunity again to dive in there, leave any comments or questions you may have, and answer questions that I may ask throughout the presentation. Feel free to drop in there right now if you want to leave a comment about who you are, what business you're in, what city you're in, and let us know. All right, let's get started. Today, we're going to talk about relentless adaptation for technology trends that are accelerating in 2021. But before we talk about what's happening today, I wanted to take a look back at our technology history to really discuss how far we've come and how quickly things perhaps change without any of us realizing it. So I'm going to show you a series of 3 photos starting here at St. Peter's Square in 2005. As you can see in this photo, there's not a lot of technology except for one little flip phone in the bottom right-hand corner. And then when we fast forward 8 years, the exact same location at St. Peter's Square, 2013, welcoming Pope Francis, almost every single person who is gathered in that square has some type of handheld device. And so I want you to look at these pictures and just imagine within less than a decade how much changed in terms of the mobile phone revolution. And then we fast forward to the year 2020, the exact same location, St. Peter's Square, and here we have the Pope. There's no one gathered, but he's live streaming on Zoom just like the rest of us. So I want you to think about these images and think about the topic for today, which of course is relentless adaptation. How do we stay on top of the trends that are happening, especially knowing how quickly they're accelerating right now? We're also at the beginning of the Internet of Things revolution, a massive change where we're going to see about 50 billion devices connected to the internet over the next few years. Now, it's hard to put that number into context, so you can imagine it a little bit like this. The average household with 2 teenage children will own roughly 50 internet-connected devices by the year 2022. Now, I encourage you right now in the group chat to let me know how many connected devices you have in your home. Those can be things like tablets and computers, maybe a smart door lock, maybe it's a gaming system or a television. Even my refrigerator and my stove is currently connected. Last time I looked, I have about 30 plus connected devices in my home, and I'd be curious to see how many you have. So drop that into the group chat just now. Looks like we have 8, and I suspect there are people right now who have even more than that. We're also at the beginning of the artificial intelligence revolution, an industry that is going to be worth about $36.8 billion by 2025. There's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence, especially in Alberta, knowing that Edmonton is a hub right now when it comes to AI research. And there are so many exciting things happening in this space. And I would argue that Canada has a really good chance in terms of leading on this front. However, at pretty much every event that I do, when it comes to talking about artificial intelligence, I get asked the same question at the end of every single Q&A. And the question is this: when we talk about AI, will AI kill us all? Yes, probably one of the top questions I've had over the past few years. So let's address that. Now, why are we worried about the future of artificial intelligence and the future of technology that is everywhere around us in this state of acceleration? Well, it doesn't help that we see images in the media that look like this. We also see technology leaders such as Elon Musk, who are saying things like this: when it comes to the future of robots, as he says, we'll be lucky if these same robots enslave us as pets. We also see scientists and researchers talk about the future, and a future where humans and machines are going to live side by side. And so often when they talk about this future, they talk about it like this.
In a recent op-ed column, you said, and I quote, "Success in creating artificial intelligence would be the biggest event in human history. Unfortunately, it might also be the last." Are you saying that robots are going to destroy humanity? And is that a scientific argument or the pitch for an amazing movie?
Artificial intelligence could be a real danger in the not-too-distant future. It could design improvements to itself and outsmart us all.
I know you're trying to get people to be cautious there, but why should I not be excited about fighting a robot?
You would lose.
Yes, that is pretty much the extent of things. Now, before we get into talking a little bit further about why I'm so optimistic about the future, I wanted to jump into the chat. I think if I can see correctly, Daryl has 35 devices connected to the internet, which is staggering. So why am I more optimistic about the future? Well, the truth is humans are actually pretty good at adapting to new technologies and adapting to changes. I want to give all of you, a chance to give yourselves a pat on the back in terms of how you've adapted over the past year to all of the changes that are in front of us. And when we think about this future, we can look for a second at the history of the elevator. In 1857, we saw the world's first passenger elevator. Now, you can only imagine the very first time that an individual got onto an elevator during those days and how terrified they were and how long it took for them to finally feel comfortable getting into an elevator. In 1900, we saw the first automatic elevator, and eventually, as the years went on, people got more comfortable all the time. But we have to remember, again, that we've always had technological changes in our society, and we've always been able to adapt to them. So what is different today in 2021? Well, the difference is this. When it comes to these changes, and this is where all of us as business owners have to learn to adapt, change has never happened this fast before, and we have to remember that it will never be this slow again. And that's the reality that we're in. We are really, truly living in this fast future. And it's important to understand this future so you don't get left behind. Where do I draw inspiration from when it comes to adapting to the changes that are happening every single day? Well, the truth is I look to the next generation. I look to my son, who is 12 years old, and I watch how these children have adapted during the pandemic. And I know that there are moms and dads and grandparents who are watching right now. And I know that you have also seen this and how they've been able to adapt to these changes almost overnight. Now, there's no better example of this than Mrs. Allison's classroom. She's a grade 3-4 teacher. And what was fascinating in September, like all of the teachers, she was told in her classroom that they could no longer sing "O Canada" because it was potentially a risk, because singing, of course, could spread the virus. Well, what did she decide to do? Well, she adapted. And she decided to teach all of the kids in the class how to sign "O Canada."
With growing hearts we sing.
So every day we can look to this next generation and understand how comfortable they are with adapting. I do want to make a quick note that I see the comment from Al who says that he likes to adapt to new technology, but he still hates elevators, and that's okay. I understand that sentiment for sure. So as we move on, what I want to do is talk about 4 tech trends that are accelerating during COVID-19. But I'm not just going to leave it there. I also want to give you lessons to be able to not just survive, but also to thrive, and a chance to ask your question at the end of each of these sections. The first thing I want to talk about is voiced first, and this era that we're going into where more and more of how we communicate is with voice or with audio. We see this as one example with smart speakers, and some staggering stats here in terms of the number of people who have smart speakers at home, or how people engage with voice assistants in their phones. About 50% of all smartphone users are engaging with voice search over the past year. So 50% of individuals are actually doing searches using voice. Just think about what a shift that has been. And I want to ask people, again, who are in the comments, how often do you use voice on your phone, or do you have a smart speaker at home? And when we think about smart speakers as another example, we're seeing incredible adoption across the country that is only being fueled by COVID-19. So we see some stats here in terms of how many people in Canada currently have smart speakers, and the numbers are already in the millions. Now, why is voice taking off, and why is this a new way of interacting and communicating in terms of getting information, and why does it matter to all of us? Well, let's think, for example, if you are a business owner and you have a website like many of you do. Well, think about what happens if all of a sudden 50% of the people searching for your website, for your products or services, are using voice. Is your website optimized in terms of voice search, which is a totally different type of SEO or search engine optimization? Now, why are more and more people using voice to interact with technology? Well, there's an accessibility reason for sure, but also we have to remember that according to this study done at Stanford University, people can speak about 3 times faster than they can type. And this is why more and more we're seeing this level of interactivity when it comes to interacting with all of this technology simply by using voice. We're seeing cities like Las Vegas as one example that have decided that they're going to use voice as a primary way to be able to communicate with the residents of that city. And how are they doing this? Well, they have decided that they're going to make it easy for the residents in Las Vegas to simply use Amazon Alexa to ask really simple questions like, which parks have tennis courts? When is the next council meeting? What is the status of my building permit? Now, you may think that this is just another cool thing that they're offering up in the city of Las Vegas. But when you dive further into this story, you realize that one of the reasons that they're doing this is because they see this as a way to make information more accessible to more people. Because after all, we have to remember how much it costs to buy a smartphone or even a computer. It can be $1,000 or more. To buy one of these smart speakers, and feel free to ask me questions about privacy a little bit later, we're talking $30, $40, or $50. So this is a way for that city to make it more accessible in terms of that information. We also saw at CES this year more and more voice technology, especially knowing that we are living in a world in a touch-free environments to stay safe from COVID. So here's an example of a refrigerator from LG, a whole touchless experience where you can walk up and the refrigerator can open on its own. Another example in the home where voice more and more is going to be a primary way that we are going to communicate in the future. I want to share 3 tools that can be helpful for all of you in your small business today to understand how to leverage the power of audio and voice. And the first one is a company that I've been following for a while called Otter.ai. It's one of my favorites. And what's amazing about this company is that it allows you to get real-time transcriptions of your video calls. So it integrates not just with Zoom, if that's a way that you're communicating, but they also have a free version of Otter.ai for Google Meet. So if you're doing a lot of video calls in terms of remote meetings with your team or your clients or customers, imagine how great it would be to have a transcript of that meeting for free within Google Meet from Otter. where again, you can see a transcript of all of the information that happens automatically. It looks like John's in the comments saying that he uses Otter from time to time. A really helpful tool. Because after all, in many ways, meetings are where innovation goes to die. They tend to not be the most productive places. But if we enhance them with voice technology like this, and we actually have notes seeing if someone has said, hey, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and we can see all of these smart notes thanks to Otter, it just makes it that much easier to be productive. When we talk about the future of voice and audio, we of course have to talk about podcasting, which is taking off in this country and around the world. We're seeing more and more adults listening to podcasts. About 27% of Canadian adults now listening to podcasts, so a sharp rise over the past few months. And what's fascinating is that there are so many great tools out there. One of my favorites, and I hope you get a chance to write this down, is called Anchor.fm. And it makes it really easy to start your own podcast and get it into all of the podcast stores. But they've also added another feature. And this is where automation is so exciting for small business owners. I am one of those. And so what this allows you to do is that you can take any blog post that you've put on your WordPress site, and Anchor.fm will automatically turn it into a podcast episode. So what has this allowed you to do? Well, essentially, it's allowed you to write one piece of content that is not only a blog post, but you can also turn it into a piece of audio. And then you can also turn it into a podcast episode, all within this affordable and often free tool called Anchor.fm. So it's a great way, again, to think about marketing. And I want you guys to look out for something that I've been noticing more and more when it comes to the future of audio. When you go to news sites, and now you're going to see this everywhere you go, you'll see on some of these news sites where they have a little listen icon that now allows you to listen to the article. And this is another sign that we're seeing in terms of a takeoff of this voice technology. Now, when we talk about audio and voice, before we get into our first Q&A, I do want to mention Clubhouse. If you don't know what Clubhouse is, it's a really simple app in many ways, but it's also recently been valued at $1 billion. You can think about it like this. It's like having a conference call that you turn into an event that, again, is audio only. And it's all the rage. Right now, it's only iOS users, but we're going to see it more and more across all of the platforms. So right now, we're seeing Clubhouse copycats on Twitter with Twitter Spaces. Facebook is likely going to introduce a feature like this as well. And there are dozens more sites that are focusing on the audio-first experience. Why is that? Well, the truth is, if you look at where I am right now in our studio in downtown Toronto, we have a lot of equipment. We have lights, we have cameras, we have software, we have hardware. It costs a lot to do video. So more and more for small businesses, we're seeing that audio is going to be the future of how you can not only brand your business, establish yourself as a thought leader, but also a different way to be able to communicate as well. So what is the first lesson here in terms of our first trend that is accelerating? Is to wrap our heads around this idea of a voice-first era, and how does it affect your business? And today, it may only affect it in minor ways, or it may be an opportunity for you to start leveraging the power of voice and audio, doing things like podcasts as one example, or even using tools like Otter.ai. And I wanted to share a resource that you can bookmark if you want to learn more about the future of voice. And it's one of the places that I go every couple of days. And that is called VoiceBot. And it is the #1 place online to understand what's happening when it comes to the future of voice. And unsurprisingly, they also have a podcast that you can listen to if you prefer to listen to podcasts. So we're going to take a short break. I'm going to check in with John and see if there are any questions that are coming in. And if you haven't had a chance to drop your question into the group chat, please do. I see some questions already. So let's take a couple minutes and then we'll move on to our next trend.
Sure, and thank you so far. This is fascinating, Amber. You mentioned privacy. Now, making data information accessible creates privacy issues. Did you want to flesh that out a little bit? What are some of the concerns that people could have with, say, smart speakers and
Absolutely. You know, I just had a friend of mine who is a really smart woman who messaged me the other day, and she said, you know, Amber, I think my phone is listening to me because I keep getting served up ads based on a conversation that I just had. And I know there's going to be people in the chat who've had similar experiences. And what I said to her is, listen, your phone has the features and the capability to listen to you as smart speakers do as well. I mean, it's built into these devices. Is it actually doing that? Probably not, but it does have the ability to do so. So one of the things I like to say to people about privacy is I think we all have to get better at digital literacy and understanding how our phones work. So if that's something you're worried about, I mean, you know, turn off your phone at night. If you buy a smart speaker, which I think can be very helpful and help to make you very productive as well, maybe you learn quickly how to turn it on mute if you're worried about privacy, and also read up on what information Google does store. So my advice for people is this: you have to weigh the positives and the negatives, and that's true of all technology, because at the end of the day, we're going to continue to see things evolve, and the more savvy we are, the better we can have a control of how our private information is being shared.
Excellent. Thank you. We have a question from Lisa. She's talking about Anchor FM when it converts the content to a podcast. How's it able to inject the right tone?
Well, it's really cool. So one of the things that you can do with Anchor.fm through these blog posts is you have the option to choose from voices. So they are more robotic type voices. That is automated, and that's what we're used to when we get calls like a robocall. We hear this robot-like voice. So you have an option for that voice to read it, but you also have an option within Anchor.fm to read it yourself. So once you start to turn that blog post into a podcast episode, it will show the blog post as a script. You can press a record button and you can use your voice. So you have a couple of ways to do it. I would always recommend the latter. So using your own voice in terms of, again, helping to build your business or your brand. And if you don't like video, which I totally understand, it's a lot of work, then I think audio is a great medium to use to be able to further build your brand, especially in this world where people are hungry for audio right now.
And we have a question, another question about Otter. So when it's taking the transcript of the content, how does it filter out any of the unnecessary content or the chatter that goes along that's irrelevant?
That's a good question. You know, one of the cool things that Otter has always promised, and it will eventually get to this point, is that eventually it can learn voices. So it parses things out as kind of speaker one, speaker two. It identifies there are different people speaking. You will still have a lot of kind of that mindless chatter that is within that conversation right now, but the technology is going to get better and better all the time. You may even have the option in this tool eventually to say things like, hey, can you get rid of any ums or ahs or, you know, those little words that you don't need in a transcript. So just remember that every 6 months there is a huge leap in terms of how far technology has come.
So what you're saying is don't try it once and then go, well, it's not for me.
Yeah, exactly. And also I think there's some of these tools, honestly, that you try and then at the time they're not relevant to you. But then 6 months later, you see that they've added new features. For me, with Otter as one example, I've been talking about Otter for the past couple of years, but just recently they made Otter free within Google Meet, which is Google's Zoom-like platform. But if you use Zoom, you have to pay for Otter. So there's an example of something even I didn't know, but I just found out there is a way to use Otter for free, and that's by using Google Meet.
Pardon me. Well, I have just one question, or one comment rather, from one of the participants, and this kind of goes right across the board. But it's the challenges when speaking with non-AI experts about AI. How you defeat that non-expert celebrity content. And what I meant by across the board is this goes beyond artificial intelligence. You hear it a lot in science generally, medicine, you know, people saying one thing when they're not the experts. So how do you combat that?
I think it's a really good point. At the same time, I think that technology needs to be accessible for anyone, right? And I think we all have the ability, and I believe this, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, we all have the ability to learn pretty much anything that we're keen on learning. And I think that's the exciting thing about 2021. So the way that I combat that is, hey, you're going to trust the people you're going to trust. But at the end of the day, I think there needs to be more people who are the explainers in the world, kind of these middle people. Am I an AI expert? No. But can I take these fundamental theories about AI and explain how they're relevant to society? And the answer is yes. And there are roles for explainers in the world, and we have to stop making technology as something that is so difficult for so many people, because the advantages are just too enormous, especially right now during a crisis like COVID-19.
And I just want to make one comment came in, and I think this is very important. I love the voice that supports my parents or disabled sister to ask questions and not need to type those questions in.
I think that is a great way to wrap up this Q&A, because I will tell you that sometimes we shun technology, but we forget that there are so many people who have issues with accessibility where technology is like magic to them. You know, I just shared a video on Twitter yesterday where we saw a video of about 6 people who are hard of hearing or totally deaf. And for the first time, thanks to technology, they're able to hear. And it's just a beautiful thing to watch that and just the magic in it. So we always have to remember that, you know, for those of us who maybe are able-bodied, we, you know, think, oh, it's not a big deal. But technology is the answer for so many people who aren't, especially with an aging population as well.
Thank you.
All right, so let's move on. I see the chat is quite busy, so that's very exciting. Keep them coming. The next thing we're going to talk about, I feel as though there are going to be lots of questions and comments about this as well. We're going to talk about machines in the wild. We're going to talk about robots and machines and how we're going to have to work in partnership over the years to come. When we talk about machines in the wild, one of the first places we should start in terms of understanding the future of how these machines work and automation in general is just to have a very brief conversation about the future of driverless cars or autonomous vehicles. What will it be like the very first time you get into one of these vehicles? What will that experience be like? And you may think, I'm never, ever going to do that, Amber. That is insane. But again, let's put ourselves into a different mindset and think about those people who can't drive for one reason or another. And again, how this technology is magic to them. Perhaps their experience will be a little like this.
Hey, we're like comedians. You said, relax. You don't have to do nothing. It knows when it needs to stop. It knows when it needs to go.
It actually rides better than my own car.
Yes, sure.
What she really liked was that it slowed down before it went around a curve and then accelerated in the curve. She's always trying to get me to do it that way.
That's the way I learned in a high school driver's ed.
So your first experience may be a little like that in terms of getting into one of these vehicles. And one of the things that we have to remember when we talk about the future of technology and autonomous cars as an example is right now there are thousands of people who are killed every single year on the roads in this country, on highways, in the country, in urban areas. And we know based on a lot of research that technology can help. We also know that when it comes to these accidents, a lot of them are because of human error. I've seen some reports that say more than 90% of fatalities on our roads are because of human error. So technology does have a role to play here. Is it perfect? The answer is no, it's not perfect. But one of the things we have to remember when it comes to all technologies is this. When it comes to the future, and I'm going to borrow a quote from Voltaire, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Now, perhaps right now you're thinking to yourself, well, I run a small business. What do self-driving cars have to do with that at all? Well, you can take this quote and you can apply it to your own business in terms of how you leverage and use technology. We all want to have perfect experiences, but sometimes, whether it's social media or using new tools in our business, it's not going to be perfect. There are going to be bumps along the way, and we all have to wrap our heads around that this is the world with technology today. And when we think about machines in the wild, I do want to address what's happening in other parts of the world and how quickly they're advancing as far as this acceleration. If we look at Japan as one example, their government has put out a robot strategy a few years ago, in fact, that has said that by the end of last year, 4 out of 5 of their care recipients will be taken care of in part by a robot. It's not those Terminator-style robots we saw off the top of the presentation. This is Robert. And Robert is a robot that could help to lift people in and out of beds. You can only imagine during COVID-19, if you think about what's taken place in long-term care, again, how we could use machines out there within different industries. And this is just one example. We're also seeing in parts of Europe where they're using robots within healthcare. One example is within a hospital where they have a robot greeter. And this robot greeter, what it does, it will help to identify people when they come into the hospital. It does a few different things. Identification also helps to tell if that individual has a mask on, and lots of other things that it can do using something called computer vision. So the idea is that the robot has a camera in it, and it's able to see people coming in, and it's also able to take the temperature of individuals coming into the hospital and finding out if someone is not wearing their masks correctly as well. Why is this useful? Well, think right now about healthcare in Canada and how at risk our frontline workers are. Now, I'm not saying with this new technology that I am a fan or supportive of the fact that machines are going to, in some cases, replace humans in certain roles. I believe in many ways the thing we have to start thinking about is that it will augment the human experience. And so we'll work in tandem with these machines. And more, that's what we have to think about in terms of the future. We're seeing Spot the robot dog, another example from a company called Boston Dynamics that's being used in Singapore right now to help people adhere to physical distancing. So what's amazing about this robot dog, you can imagine being in a park, you're not physical distancing, and all of a sudden the robot dog is able to see that you're less than 6 feet apart and notify you. It's a little bit terrifying, but I want to share these examples to, again, talk about that acceleration in different parts of the world, that acceleration that we know is going to happen here. There's a construction company right now in Quebec that is leveraging the power of these robot dogs on the construction site to be able to take pictures of the progress within that construction site and be able to share that progress in real time. And if you don't understand how Spot the robot dog works, here's a quick example.
Hi, I'm Russell, and this is Spot. So you've probably seen this robot before, maybe hauling a truck or dancing to Bruno Mars's Uptown Funk. It's the first of this generation of semi-autonomous four-legged robots, and it does a lot more than just make videos for the internet. For about a month now, Boston Dynamics has been putting Spot to work, leasing units out to industry partners, and seeing how this kind of robot holds up in the real world. When you're standing next to
So we are bound to see more and more of this. And I do want to pick up on a comment that I'm seeing in the chat right now. It's a comment from Eldad who says, if we trust a taxi driver we don't know will bring us to safety everywhere, we should have no problem relying on technology to do this. We also see a comment from Al, a hammer can be used for both good and evil. Good and evil. Technology is just another type of hammer. And I think these are all really great points. So I just wanted to reinforce this fact that whether we like this or not, this is the future that we are heading into. And the thing that's most important to me is that we all have a voice in understanding this future and to be able to step up and really design it for ourselves, but also take advantages of the opportunities that exist. If you think about e-commerce as another example, and I'm curious if there are business owners who are watching right now who are in e-commerce, we've seen some phenomenal acceleration over the past year. Some experts are saying that we've seen what we thought would happen in 5 years as far as progress happen within as little as 6 months. We see this at larger organizations like Amazon recognizing more and more when we think about the future of e-commerce. They're already moving in this direction where they know that robots will be part of the answer. This is an example of Scout, who is delivering packages on this suburban sidewalk. And you can only imagine that this is the future that is going to happen, not in every neighborhood, but in some neighborhoods where it makes sense across Canada. And when we think about what's taking place, the thing that all of us have to remember is this. When we talk about our machine and human partnerships in the future and how machines will help us, we're looking at some pretty dramatic numbers in terms of the rate of automation. For example, in 2018, when it came to the division of labor, humans did about 71% of that labor and machines about 29%. As we move quickly towards 2025, we're seeing this split of almost 50-50. This is the division of labor in the future. So if you think that you won't be affected in one way or another by the future of machines and robots, just take a look at this graph. 50-50 will be the division of labor. So we know that this is a reality in front of us. Now, the good news is that there are companies across this country that are innovating right now. A great example is out of British Columbia, a company called Oscar that used to make these really interesting garbage cans that relied on computer vision and now have shifted their focus to something called Oscar Hygiene. It does sanitation and wellness, so they are stations within businesses that will take temperatures and all of these other tasks that are necessary to get back into the workplace safely. So we're seeing some signs that innovation and pivoting is happening. Is it enough? That's the thing that I worry the most about. And that's why I'm glad that they're doing this speaker series so more and more people can be exposed to this fast future right in front of us. Before we get to a Q&A about machines and robots, which is always the most fascinating topic, and I know there'll be lots of questions, I want to just wrap up this section and say this. When it comes to a lesson as far as the future of machines, what can all of us do? We may not all have touch points, in terms of being small business owners where we're going to have machines in the workplace right away. But we can learn, and there are lessons out there that can be applied to all of us in our businesses. And one of the best lessons is this. Find the courage to pilot, to try new things, because we're seeing this everywhere when it comes to machines and robots. And I wanted to recommend a book that has totally changed my mindset in terms of the way that I do business. And the book is called Loon Shots. One of the reasons I love this book is that it focuses on how to nurture those crazy ideas that win wars, cure diseases, and transform industries. So often as a small business owner, and I've been a small business owner for more than a decade, I know sometimes you probably have a crazy idea and your relatives and your colleagues are telling you, that's insane, don't bother pursuing that idea. But I promise you, once you read this book, it will put you into a different mindset, and you'll be able to very quickly see that the world needs some of those crazy ideas right now, and we need people to be thinking outside the box. So I wanted to check in with John for just a minute before we move on to the next section and jump into the chat, see if there are any questions, or if John has any questions as well.
Well, we've got one question, and you've kind of answered it with Loon Shots, so that's definitely on the recommended reading list. But what can a small business owner or entrepreneur do to incorporate some machines into his or her business?
Well, I think we also have to define what we mean when we say machines. So if we think about machines right now, you may think, again, we always go towards that kind of large-scale human-like robot. But we can think about machines in different ways. A smart speaker, I would argue, is an example of a machine. It's voice-activated. So that's one example. If you want to understand how voice may impact you within a small business, get a smart speaker, play with it within your office just to understand the level of interaction and also to see the progress over time. So my advice for people is that even if they don't have touch points with machines right now, I think it's important to understand this future of automation. And a little bit later, John, I'm going to talk about automation within the workspace, and I'm going to recommend some tools that help with automation, not through using machines, but instead through using software.
Excellent. And one more. It's about a robot strategy. You mentioned Japan's got one. Are you aware of other nations doing similar things?
I worry all the time. I don't know if people in the chat feel the same way, but I worry all the time that Canada gets into this position often of potentially being a follower. And what I mean by that is that if we really look outside the borders of this country and see what's happening on the innovation front, I think we'll see many companies and many countries that are much more progressive in terms of adopting new technologies. So at the end of the day, it is a big concern of mine. And I think at the end of the day, we do need to have a robot strategy, but I would go one step further. In my presentation today, I'm going to talk about the effects of automation on the future of work. And that's probably the part that I worry the most about. If we know that the division of labor in terms of humans and machines is going to hurl towards 50-50 in terms of percentage, what does that do to work and jobs in this country? And why are we not having these conversations as much as we should? So that's where my head is right now.
Fair enough. Now, as you think about that stuff, how do you ensure coworkers, family members maintain a level of digital literacy?
I think this, again, is something that we also need to pay more attention to, especially with the next generation. We need to be teaching more about digital literacy within schools. But also, I think there is this generation within this country that we need to perhaps provide training to, and that is an older generation. You imagine COVID-19 right now during this pandemic, how important it's been for our seniors to be online. And some of them have adapted and adopted these new tools, but certainly not everyone. So I think when it comes to colleagues who need more education on digital literacy, my advice as a leader, as someone who runs a small team, is that this should be incorporated into your business in terms of a learning strategy. So that may mean that you offer a small budget for them to take courses. Maybe you do webinars, you do sessions just like this. I think it's important that learning within small businesses, no matter what size you are, is built in to your plan for the year in terms of one of your strategic plans that you plan to address. Because at the end of the day, I think that's one of the things that we have to start to understand, is that we have to be lifelong learners. We have to always embrace these changes, and it's hard to keep up. So an employer, I think, has to take on that responsibility of helping their colleagues or their employees.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's leave it at that, and I'll let you dive into the next topic.
Okay, so we want to stay on time for all of you. So we are going to dive into the next topic, and this is one that affects all of us. And I know that there are small business owners right now who are going to see this title and hopefully breathe a sigh of relief knowing that we're going to address the topic of wellness and technology and how it can help. We have seen a massive shift in terms of the way people are working within this country. And what has this shift done? Well, all of a sudden, it's accelerated how many more people are working from home. The numbers, are pretty impressive in terms of how quickly this has changed. And it's not something where in a few months things are going to go back to normal. And this is a thing I think we should all keep top of mind. 48% of employees will likely work remotely at least part of the time, even after COVID-19. So I think the question for everybody in terms of business owners is, what is your work from home plan? And how do you incorporate remote work into your future? Where does it make sense and where doesn't it make sense? Because right now people are developing habits where they're going to want to do this more and more, or maybe some of them are going to want to get back into the office. Now, when we think about the future of remote work, one of the things we also have to acknowledge as leaders is to understand the shift that's taken place. Remote workers are, in fact, working more hours. And I cannot say this enough. We have to remember that now that everybody's getting up, and from the time they pour themselves a cup of coffee and get their kids off to school, they are starting their workday, and probably their workday is extending well past dinner time. How do you put structure within your organization to ensure that everybody is healthy and not stressed out and not working too many hours? Early on in the pandemic, I had a chance to chat with a company, and I was so impressed. It's a small business. And one of the first things that they did last spring is they actually put together a work from home plan. And that plan was to advise the workers within their company how to work from home, and also provide recommendations that would lead to wellness, and think about the wellness of those individuals within the company. Now, this is an interesting stat in terms of the future of remote work, and one I think about often. When we talk about remote work, one of the interesting things in terms of this virtual environment is that we know that the ascendance of worker bees to remote leadership roles may provide validation and even relief to the legions of hard workers who have for a generation watched charming colleagues rise to the top. What does that mean? Well, we're seeing some research that the fact is, if you're one of those people who gets a lot done in the remote work world, there is a good chance that you will actually be applauded for that work more easily than being within the office. And I think this is interesting in the world of remote work. It's about productivity, getting things done. And again, we have to think about that in terms of how we direct our teams, who we hire, and what it actually means to have a successful remote workforce. Another thing we also have to remember when it comes to remote work is this. So many people right now are suffering in terms of working from home and dealing with things like back pain or anxiety. Many of them want to go hybrid. So even though we talk about remote work, there are probably a lot of people within your organization, no matter the size, who potentially maybe want just a couple of days at home and a couple of days back in the office. But more than that, we are not a society right now that is necessarily its healthiest. And what does that mean in terms of your business? We know that anxiety is a big mental health issue that's affecting about 52% of home workers. And here's the thing I want all of you to remember as business owners. 76% of people have had no training at all on how to work from home. How can you better help people within your business work from home in a healthier way? Well, I want to talk for a second, too, about a few simple things you can do. Recently, I actually hosted a couple of workshops where I talked about remote work and how to be healthier when it comes to working in a virtual environment. And one of the things I kept coming across is such a simple shift in how we think about having video meetings. It's a tiny little change, and it's from Harvard Business Review. And what they say is that so often we are eating up people's time in terms of the length of the meetings that we're putting forward within our world as far as Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever you're using. So we're blocking people's entire days. And this is another question for people within the group chat. Are you having too many meetings or too few meetings? How do you feel that it's balanced right now? And also the recommendation from Harvard Business Review is that instead of sending out meeting invites for kind of a 30-minute block or a 60-minute block, one of the things that they've noticed is that an employee can be a lot more productive and healthier if you allow them to have breaks between meetings and that time in the day that we used to have in the office where we transition from meeting to meeting. So we see a comment already from Terry saying not enough breaks between meetings. John saying lots of meetings, so many meetings. I honestly can't keep up with the chat at this point. So here's the tip. Next time you schedule a meeting or you're invited to a meeting or you have a team meeting within your business, perhaps make a suggestion that the meeting lengths are not 30 minutes or 60 minutes. Maybe they're 15 minutes or 20 minutes and allow people to build time into their day when they have those breaks. It looks like Kavita has started doing that recently. It gives me more time for nature breaks. And I think we're all going to feel this. And it's not just us. There is research that actually backs this up as well. So that's one little takeaway that I hope all of you will try. And I see there's more and more comments coming in. Yes, curtail the lengths of meetings, especially when it comes to video, because it's exhausting. What can we do when it comes to wellness technology and what trends are we seeing out there? I want to talk specifically about two companies that are getting a lot of credit in terms of being some of the most innovative companies. Of course, we're talking about innovation today, so it's worth talking about these businesses. The first one is called Calm. It is a meditation guide in your pocket. You've probably heard of Calm or Headspace. These are really inexpensive apps that you can use, again, to de-stress. The good news is it only takes about 60 seconds to put yourself in a different state when it comes to stress. And these apps can really, really help. So when we think about this, we saw, just interestingly, if you were watching the U.S. election last fall, you may have noticed that Calm, the app, made an appearance. They were the sponsor of the Key Race Alert, which might have been the best branding ever, knowing how stressed people were during that election. And we know more and more when it comes to Calm, this is a really easy way for people to just take a few minutes of pause. So maybe as a small business owner, if you can afford to do so, you give someone a digital subscription to afford to get a meditation app. It can be as little as $10 a month, but those are the type of things you can build into your wellness plan. Maybe you want to go a step further, and that's the second innovative company I want to talk about, which is Whoop. I'm wearing one right now, and it's basically a Whoop band that is kind of like an Apple Watch, but it has no screen, as you can see. And what's really cool about this is that you never take it off. It charges in about 30 minutes, so really easy to charge. We just place the charger on top of it. Super, super simple. And again, a really effective tool to measure things like your resting heart rate, your heart rate variability, your sleep as well. And the reason I mention this is one of these companies that I believe is a company to watch when it comes to wearables and wellness. But I also want to mention it because there are some companies that are stepping up. Like one example of a company that's doing so is called Tory Burch, where essentially what they've done is they've given Whoop straps to 70 employees as part of a wellness initiative. Now, this doesn't mean that all of a sudden the employer has access to all of this data and information. They're doing this again as part of the wellness initiative, recognizing that people need help and they need resources, again, working in this new environment. So we're going to take a quick break, but before we do, I just want to talk about the lesson for this section in terms of wellness tech. What does this mean for small business owners? We have a small team, less than 5 people, and we work with about a dozen different freelancers. And I think it's important for all of us as leaders to really cultivate this idea of team wellness. So I wanted to share this link that I encourage all of you to check out. It's a really helpful article called 8 Ways Managers Can Support Employees' Mental Health. I've put a tiny URL here, but I also want to let people know that I'm going to make my slides available if you want a PDF version of them, so you can check this out there as well. So I do want to take a quick break. After this, we're only going to have one more section and one more Q&A, but let's stop for a second, John, and see if there's any comments that you have or anything in the chat as well.
Thanks, Amber. Yeah, we got a really good one from Terry. She wants to get your comments on this concept of Deep Work Wednesday. The whole team blocks Wednesday morning with no calls, no meetings, and it allows people to dive deep into what they're doing.
I love it.
Have you heard of this?
I have not heard of it, but I already love it. So John, you know about it, really?
I don't know about it, but Terry was asking if this is something you're familiar with. But I think it's something that I'd sure like to adopt.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. So I think the thing is, so there's a couple of things. I'm going to make sure that we keep on time. But again, I talked about this other webinar that I did, which was how to work remotely and still build relationships. And one of the things that came out of it is that we feel exhausted in these virtual meetings, right? All the time. Not this meeting because we're having so much fun, but in like a Zoom meeting where you're sitting down and you're having a weekly catch up. And it's not just you who feels exhausted. Everybody feels exhausted because there's something happening actually physiologically when we're staring all the time. We have no breaks, so our brain gets very tired. Compare that to going into a boardroom and meeting with 6 or 7 people where you're looking around, you're walking out to get a coffee, and there are lots of breaks and lots of things, again, to kind of keep us awake and alert. So that's one of the reasons that we're so exhausted. So I think for small business owners, we need to really think about, like was mentioned, blocking time, shortening meetings, but most importantly, and I touched on this, have a plan for remote work. What is that plan? What does it look like? And it could be that no meetings are over a certain amount of time and they all have to have a clear agenda. Maybe you use Otter to get all of your voice notes so people can read the transcriptions. Again, let's think smarter about how we have these meetings to be more productive, but also to be healthier as well.
That's excellent. So I think the plans, they don't need to be complicated, in depth, just some high level ideas to get people going, because there's probably a lot of entrepreneurs out there that are thinking, how do I even dive into this?
Yeah, it can be really simple. And again, just thinking about wellness. And I don't care how small of a business you are. I think everybody has the ability to do just this. I see also in the chat, Rebecca is saying we're bringing in Focus Friday, which is no team group meeting, so everyone can focus on writing, thinking, clarity, clearing their heads before the weekend to rest and relax. Just try stuff. Remember that Voltaire quote that I shared, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You don't have to try it or do it forever, but we certainly have to mix things up. We have to get out of our own heads and recognize that this world that we're going into is not going to, I think, get back to normal. It will be a new normal, and we all have to accept that these technological accelerations that we're seeing right now are going to affect all of us.
Excellent. Let's not forget Taco Tuesday, and then on to the next topic.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so let's move on. This is just a quick recap of where we've come. We talked about voice. How do you plan for the voice first revolution we're about to go into? Machines. How do you find the courage to pilot? Wellness. How do you cultivate team wellness and shift things up and use the research that we have so far to be better and healthier when it comes to the future of work? The last thing I want to talk about is automation in the age of COVID-19, something we're seeing more and more. I am not ignorant to the fact that when I talk about technology, there is a downside, and that downside is the fact that nearly 50% of jobs are at risk of changing in the coming decades. This is a chart that anyone can check out from Bloomberg, and I encourage you to do so. You can input any job title imaginable and find out the likelihood of automation and how that job will be affected in the coming years. And you can see down here we have cashiers, waiters, retail sales, all of those people where we see these bright red bubbles. Those are the people most at risk. Now, layer on top of that a pandemic, because again, this chart is a couple of years old, and you can only imagine that acceleration that's taking place. When I talk about automation for small business owners, one of the things I do want to talk about is the positive side of automation, how it can help. But I have to first explain exactly what it is. So I have 3 really simple examples. Here's an example of an app that will automate the process of keeping a food diary using artificial intelligence or computer vision, which is a subset of AI. So essentially, it allows you to point the camera on your phone at the food that is right in front of you, and it will determine what you're eating and tell you the nutritional breakdown of everything that you're about to put in your mouth. You may not want to do this if you're having an unhealthy meal, but nonetheless, this is super cool. It's called Calorie Mama, and I mention this because it used to take a long time to keep a diary of all the food you're eating and find out the calories and the nutritional breakdown, but all of that can be automated. So a great example of automation. When it comes to marketing, and this is something I think every small and medium-sized business needs to understand, we are going to see more and more automation tools. A great example of one of these tools is called Innovates, and what it allows you to do is to automate your social media videos. You choose the size based on the social media platform, and as they say, in 7 minutes or less, with no experience, you're able to automate a video, choose the templates, choose the text, and all of a sudden create this really beautiful video for social media that used to cost thousands and thousands of dollars to create. An example of how automation can help you. Again, that's called Innovates. And finally, when it comes to remote work, something we've talked a lot about, here's a tool from the company Grammarly. You probably know Grammarly because they will automatically check your grammar and tell you if there are mistakes. Well, now they have something called Grammarly's Tone Detector. So what this does is helps you improve the tone of your emails. Now think about how important this is in a time like now where we're all working virtually. So the idea will tell you if something sounds defensive and ways to fix it. It will tell you how to be encouraging and suggest a change in language. Again, it's called Grammarly and it's helping with tone detection, something that can be really useful or really hurtful if you go the wrong direction in this age of remote work. So as I talk about automation, those are 3 simple examples of how more and more we're going to see software. That's something I mentioned before that will help small business owners. Now, you may think that what you may be looking for, you may do a search and it's not available today. And that's why it's important in terms of digital literacy to be on top of all the new tools and technologies on even a weekly or a monthly basis, because there's always new stuff coming out. Now, if we think about this, what does it mean to all of us as business owners and as people who want to grow our businesses? Well, we need to also think about the skills that are necessary for the future. Yes, digital literacy is one of them, but also if we understand the skills that are growing according to the World Economic Forum, those skills include things like analytical thinking and innovation, active learning and learning strategies, creativity, originality, complex problem solving, critical thinking. What do you see on this list where it's talking about the skills that are growing in the future? These are all human skills. These are things that make us uniquely human that machines cannot do right now. That's why we have to spend time on figuring out how to collaborate, how to think critically. All of those things are so important for the future. Now, when we talk about the landscape of the future, we know that there are going to be jobs that are at risk, but there are also opportunities as well. And growing demand for things like digital marketing specialists, data analysts and scientists, machine learning specialists. So there's going to be a lot of growth in that area. And as we move forward, I want to leave you with this one little bit of advice that is so critical. All of what we've talked about today, and if you've attended other sessions with this group, is all about this idea of constant learning. And we can use the late futurist Alvin Toffler's quote to really reinforce this. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. I want you guys to think about this for a second as we wrap up for today and have a couple of minutes for a final Q&A. This is so essential right now that we embrace lifelong learning, whether it's through reading books or podcasts or reading newsletters, whatever it might be, because the acceleration that is happening right now when it comes to new technologies and automation and everything that I've talked about, I don't want to scare you, but the truth is you can have your head in the sand and you can truly get left behind. And the goal is for all of us to come together and help each other rise up during this occasion and be able to design the future that we're going into. Because after all, if we know and we think about the past and how quickly technology changed during the mobile phone revolution as one example, between 2005 and 2013. And then all of a sudden we had a pandemic in 2020 that we're still in today. You can only imagine how much has accelerated and how fast things are going and how essential it is for all of us to understand this future that we're going into and today to start making changes within our own businesses. I want to thank all of you for listening. I think we have 2 or 3 minutes left for a few questions, and I see some comments coming in, and I'm happy to answer them. And if we don't get to them, I'm also easy to find on social media and happy to answer any other questions from people coming in there.
Thank you so much, Amber. This is a fascinating topic, and we've got a couple of questions, couple of comments. That Toffler quote is profound to think about. Now, you recommended earlier VoiceBot as a great resource for kind of staying abreast of what's going on with the technology. Are there any other resources that you can share?
Excellent question. I think Bloomberg has a lot of great resources. Even if you have to get a subscription to that, that's probably a good idea. If you're looking for free blogs, even just reading every day, blogs like The Verge can help keep you up to date on what's happening with technology. Mashable on the social media side. If marketing is critical for you and you're a small business owner, one of the best resources is Social Media Examiner. So those are just a few that can be really, really helpful. And there are also lots of podcasts out there as well.
Excellent. Thank you. And one question from Sana. She says, it's a fascinating topic. Thank you very much. She loved the book recommendation. It appears like she's in the healthcare industry, and she says one of the biggest in-market hurdles they face is the general reluctance to adopt new technology and innovations across Canada. So are there any recommendations you have for encouraging conversations for change? She's really interested to know your thoughts.
Absolutely. I think you can apply that to any industry, and I know we just have a short amount of time, but I would just say if you can somehow convince whoever is a leader or manager, maybe that's you, to put together a little task force, and that task force can be responsible for piloting some projects. You know, make it sound less intimidating, work together every quarter to try new things and experiment. I think that's a good way to get out of these sort of committee by committee decisions that can take so long and require so many people. So if you have an ability to kind of take these baby steps as a smaller group, I think that could be very efficient. But honestly, at the same time, I think that's the thing that's going to stop Canada from being a leader in innovation is our fear of moving quickly. And that's why on all of these, you see all these, in an innovation index that I've watched for the past few years, and you see Canada seems to be slipping a little bit. And I believe that's one of the reasons.
Right. Fascinating topic, Amber. There were a few questions we couldn't get to. My apologies. But as Amber said, reach out to her on social media and engage with her that way. We will have a recording of this available as well, so you can come back and listen again. Amber, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure chatting with you and listening to you.
Thank you so much, and I'm happy to send you guys my slides, and you can distribute them as well, because I know there's probably lots of things people didn't get a chance to write down, so happy to do that too.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.